Hey everybody, welcome back to your Dawn of Autonomy podcast. I'm Dawn Zoldi, your host and the CEO of P3 Tech Consulting. We are in a month that we have dedicated to ecosystem, sponsored by Grand Sky. And when you think of ecosystem, you have to think of all the pieces and parts that go into making drones fly, especially beyond visual line of sight. And we're super excited today to have with us Craig Mahaney. He is with the DronePort network, and he's going to tell us all about the exciting things they're doing out of Oklahoma and beyond. So Craig, great to have you on the show.
Yeah, thanks, Don. Super excited to be here. Chat a little bit.
Awesome. So Craig, tell everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Well, we'll try to keep the bio short here. About 26 years in the aerospace industry, prior Navy, 17 years with the FAA, mostly on the air traffic, airspace management side, so mostly operational. Spent the last few years of my time in the FAA doing policy work as a senior advisor and chief of staff in the policy office at headquarters. Spent a little time on Capitol Hill, did a one-year stint with his GAC as a staffing Senator Langford of Oklahoma, and yeah, I joined private industry back in 2021, left the FAA, and have been running a regional innovation cluster here in Oklahoma. Oklahoma City is where I'm based out of. So did that for a couple years, and then the firm that I worked for at the time, Development Capital Networks, spun out a new company called DronePort Network, focused on commercial UAS infrastructure, and asked me to take over, step in, and take the lead of that. So yeah, it's been a little over 2 years now, and things are hopping. So
things are hopping. I was working about a year or so ago with the Tulsa Innovation Labs. I know we're going to talk about them a little bit later, but a lot going on in that Tulsa area, as you said, that kind of cluster, the economic cluster, if you will. So really excited to talk about that. But let's talk specifically about DronePort Network. So spun off, as you say. So again, what kind of is the purpose of DPN, and what's the origin story there?
Yeah, so I feel like the purpose has changed 3 or 4 times since we started, but the innovations or the industry is changing so fast. We're kind of having a pivot based on what our kind of partners are asking us to do. The origin story is actually more kind of from an economic development perspective. The Regional Innovation Cluster I spoke about, the UAS Cluster Initiative, it 6-7 years ago, when it was doing some early UAS work in Kansas and Oklahoma, they started to have a lot of conversations with city councils, airport managers, so on and so forth, thinking through what it would look like to build infrastructure within their community that would support UAS, commercial UAS. So a lot of workshops, a lot of just meetings, and trying to help folks think through that, what we know, what we don't know, what the regulations may or may not look like. So that happened over several years. Eventually that turned into, the industry got to a point where, okay, we've got to start actually doing some of this work. Now it's more project management rather than just consulting, it's actually implementation. And so that was the reason that it was spun out as a separate company, just because it was kind of a side hustle at the time, and it became so much work, it really needed to be its own thing. And that was sort of the same time that I had left the FAA, moved back to Oklahoma, and started to work for them. And kind of with my background, it was kind of a perfect fit based on kind of what I had seen happen in traditional aviation, traditional air traffic management, integration of the airspace, kind of some of the things that I had kind of lived and breathed for so many years. So that's sort of the genesis of it. And our purpose now, as of the last 6 months, has been a lot of project implementation, system integration, right? Working with different partners, technology partners. We know a lot of folks in this industry that have companies that are building really cool technology. And so we never really set out to have our own product or build anything. It was kind of, we were there to fill the gaps because everybody's trying to find customers. But because the technology is so unique, and there really isn't a customer base yet, you're usually having to participate in these large projects. We'll talk about Project Ultra in a little bit, right? So most of these companies they want to do what they do well. They don't want to manage projects. And so we found ourselves doing a lot of that, just kind of making everything work. And then also finding different sources of funding to go out and get those projects. So we're still doing a lot of that. We have a contract with Osage Nation, Osage LLC, the for-profit arm of Osage Nation, to develop Skyway 36 DronePort outside of Tulsa, which is kind of why we're so involved in that Tulsa ecosystem. So that's one of the projects that we manage. But we started identifying some specific gaps in the technology. Yep. So we are sort of developing a product called CAP, which we can talk about it in a little bit. And that's really more focused on smaller scale, low cost airspace awareness and management solutions that a lot of our technology providers just aren't filling that gap. So we're kind of working with them to figure out how to do that right now.
Okay, very good. You there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, there was a lot. Yeah, sorry.
And by the way, I was remiss, Craig, you mentioned, you serve the United States Navy. Of course, this week we in the United States celebrated Veterans Day. So thank you for your service. And for everybody out there, everybody out there that also served, you see my flag behind me in my shadow box. I thank you also for your service. And I was just recently in Canada, where they were celebrating their actual Remembrance Day. And, and also for those that follow advanced air mobility, including complex drone operations, the Advanced Air Mobility Institute just recently published their veterans report. So if you haven't seen that, check that out. So I wanted to say that. And then the other thing I wanted to say, Craig, you mentioned how like DronePort Network, you had an initial idea of what it was going to be, and it continues to evolve. I think any really good business, it has to evolve, right, with what's happening in the world and it happening with technology. When I was up in Canada, I just gave the keynote at Aerial Evolution Canada, and that was one thing I said is be brave, right? And part of that is pivoting when needed. And so I love how you're looking around, you're responding to what the industry actually needs. And the last thing I want to say is, you covered a lot of ground in terms of what's happening in Oklahoma. So I want to start first with the Osage Nation. We hear a lot about our brothers and sisters at the Cherokee Nation, of Oklahoma. Actually, the Cherokees are in Oklahoma too, but the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, Cherokees actually are flying way below the radar. They're doing a ton of stuff that nobody knows about. But I just saw somebody 2 weeks ago was talking about that. But the Choctaw Nation of Oklahoma, I think most people in the drone space are very familiar with what they're doing because they got into the integration pilot program, the Beyond program. They've got Daisy Ranch. James Grimsley has been out and about and as really an emissary for them, and also has been on this show. The Nation actually sponsored our podcast for the month of March, which was R&D to Real World Ops. But you're talking about the Osage Nation, which, by the way, was the nation featured in Children of the Flower Moon. If anybody has seen that movie, wow, what a powerful and sad story, frankly. Tell us about the Osage Nation and this LLC they created, and how you're working with them.
So Osage Nation is they're one of the smaller tribes. So mostly Osage County encompasses part of Tulsa. So it's that area of Oklahoma. They also have a very large ranch similar to the one that Choctaw Nation has, right? It's 53,000 acres that they acquired, I believe it was 7 or 8 years ago now. So that is part of some of the work that we're doing up there. They can control the ground risk just like Choctaw Nation does. So that makes it pretty valuable. But so Osage Nation, a smallish tribe, but kind of up and coming and really, I guess it's probably been about 8 or 9 years ago, the nation itself and Chief Standing Bear really saw the advantages and probably started to see some of the things that Choctaw Nation was doing. And then Cherokee Nation is right next to the Osage Nation. So they already kind of know what's going on, a little bit what's going on with Cherokee Nation. And you are right, Cherokee Nation has been involved in the UAS space for many, many years, but mostly on the DoD, can't talk about it type of project. So
exactly.
they don't get a lot of press. Yeah. And I think they're probably fine with that, right? So as long as they're doing the work, that's what they care about. So
exactly.
So Osage Nation, they have as most tribes, because it's a government, they have to spin out a for-profit entity because they can't do for-profit work through the tribe. And so Osage LLC is their for-profit arm, and then then they have the Osage Casino side, which is the other for-profit arm. The LLC side is all other businesses under Osage Nation that are not casino related, right? So
Okay.
most of their 8A businesses, 8A contracts, and if folks don't know what that is, you can just Google 8A. It'll tell you all about the SBA 8A process, that tribes are kind of super 8A, so they can get government contracts much more easily. So that is who DronePort Network has a contract with, because they were basically tasked to take this property, this Skyway 36 facility, which is kind of co-located with one of their their largest casino in the state, and is right outside of downtown Tulsa. And so we've been helping them develop that with an advanced aerospace focus. So UAS, AAM, developing that infrastructure. It's a big lift, but the Osage Nation has been, appropriating funds over the last few years to help finance that.
So I want to talk about Skyway 36, because this is very significant. We're hearing a lot of things about like the Dallas Key site, right?
Sure.
We're hearing about, for example, we just had AC Chris Chucky from AX Enterprise. I always have to remember like the title of her company, because there's an X and there's a Z. There's a Z in Enterprise, but MC was just recently on the show talking about what they're doing in New York, right, with their 50-mile corridor.
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. I don't think a lot of people, Craig, know about Skyport 36. So tell everybody what this is, because this is a really, really big deal.
Yeah. Skyway 36 is, like I said, it's the geographic specific facility. It's an actual place. There's a picture of it you can see now. You can see downtown Tulsa in the background. I think the really important piece of Skyway 36 is not just that it's an Osage Nation property. It's on trust land, which provides some advantages to businesses and companies that set up shop there. Probably very similar to kind of what's going on in the Durant area with Choctaw Nation. But I think the real differentiator is, you can see, I mean, it is an urban environment. It is not out in the middle of nowhere. You can fly into it and drive 15 minutes from the airport to get to it. You can actually fly and land there. It's a smallish runway. You probably can't fly in there unless you have like a Cessna 182 or something that you own. But so it's very strategically located. But not only that, a couple other things. It is one of the primary nodes and access points into Skyway Range, which is the longer sort of UAS BVLOS test range that is being stood up and funded by EDA through the Build Back Better Regional Challenge Grant a few years back. And so there is capability that OSU and OAIR, Dr. Jacob and the Tulsa Innovation Labs team that has helped put together. And so Skyway 36 just happens to sit right in the middle of all that activity. And so it has become sort of like a feeder for the potential businesses and potential testing, even though OSU owns some of the entry points, down in Stillwater at the campus. Skyway 36 has really become kind of the hub of the entry into that BVLOS test site that's being developed there. Yeah.
Okay, I misspoke. It's Skyway 36.
Yeah, you're good.
You
right
have
the first time and then
a Skyway
right?
Range. No, because there's a lot
It's very
going on
confusing,
there, Craig.
Yeah.
And like, again, not a lot of people fully appreciate the extent of what is happening in this Tulsa region. And you're a big part of this. You mentioned Dr. Jacob. And so for everybody out there, Dr. Jamie Jacob is who we're talking about here. He's with Oklahoma State University. He's doing tons of stuff in this space. And in fact, Dr. Jacob was also on our podcast earlier this year in March. So if you missed that show, check it out, because he's talking about in that session about all of the R&D they're doing. And so what you're saying is this Skyway 36 is kind of like a nexus between all of it. Now, tell me more about the range itself. You're saying this is a BVLOS, beyond visual line of sight corridor.
Right.
How far is it, and kind of where is that located in relation to maybe some of the other things around there, maybe in relation to Choctaw or Dallas?
Right. Yeah. So the range is, I think the original plan was 130-ish miles. It mostly is a triangle. So the point, it basically connects Tulsa, Stillwater, and then Pawhuska, which is, kind of where the movie you mentioned is focused. That's the headquarters of Osage Nation. That's up where the ranch is. So don't have a visual for you. I would have thrown it in, but Oops, my bad on that.
It's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. So folks can check it out. If you just Google Skyway Range, Skyway 36, you can find the website and check out the maps of kind of where things are physically located. You mentioned a lot of people don't know about it. I think that, some people know, a lot of people don't know because we haven't, up until like the last 6 months, we haven't done a lot of promotion work because it just takes so much time to develop the like physical and digital infrastructure required to do anything. And, you got to think about waivers, like the, like the IPP now beyond program test sites. I mean, they've had years and years and years to build up that capability before people started asking to do things there.
Right.
The more that we were having is like, this thing got funded and like immediately people showed up and said, hey, I would like to start flying. And it's like, well, we got to get the radars in place. We got to take care of the C2. Like that all takes time. So we're finally getting to a place where we're having radars delivered. OAR is able to stand up the research and development support that they need. So we plan to, we've got a couple testing projects in the pipeline, and we plan to have things pretty well rolling by 2025. So super excited about that. It's been a long journey to kind of get that. It's one thing to get the money. It's another thing to actually implement all the pieces that need to be paid for. So.
And you just mentioned OAR.
Yeah.
That's an acronym. Can you explain what that is?
Yeah. So OAR is actually Dr. Jacobs' shop now at OSU. So OSU, and please don't ask me the history of OAR and how it came about.
No, I think Jamie did that. I think Jamie did that on the show.
Yeah. So OAR is basically the arm within OSU and has some other state affiliations because it's a land grant university that is doing most of the UAS and AM work for OSU now. So all the engineers and graduate students are kind of falling within that OAR. All the contracts are flowing through OAR, and OAR actually is the lead sub-awardee or a grant awardee for the Build Back Better Regional Grant Challenge. And we haven't even talked about tech hubs. Like that's a whole nother thing that's happened, which we can talk about if you like. Lots of interesting things to happen and to come around secure autonomy in Tulsa.
Yeah, so you're the tech hub, and then there's a counter UAS piece to it that you need to on as well. I mean,
there's
you
a lot
guys
going
really,
on. There's a whole lot going on.
Yeah, you have your fingers in almost every pie, but frankly, you need to. But now I want to really drill down then on DronePort networks, and as you said, this is almost like the prequel, right? This is like we're talking about this. The big launch is 2025. You've been working hard getting all of this set up. DronePort Networks has been, a backbone of this. So tell everybody exactly then what you have been preparing to kind of ready this entire ecosystem for this launch.
Yeah, I mean, I think for us, one of the things that we were asked to do early on, but by both Tulsa Innovation Labs, OAR, maybe less OAR, but we have a good relationship with them, and then also with Osage LLC, who kind of brought us in, was number one, there was a vision, but help refine what that vision really should be, what the strategy should be. Like, it's one thing to have a vision, but to have a vision that you can actually implement in a timely way, it could be sustainable. Like that's where the real hard work happens.
Yeah.
And so that's what we've been doing for the last 2 years, and also finding additional investment, finding new partners, finding new stakeholders, getting everyone to learn to row in the same direction and have, you don't have to have the exact same priorities, but similar enough priorities to do that. We've been doing the company recruitment, business development, because we want folks to know what we're building. So some of that is actual infrastructure development. Like we just closed out an RFP for to bring in a firm to do master planning for some property around Skyway 36 that will work in conjunction with what Tulsa Innovation Labs has been doing. So that's a process. So we're going to start going through that over the next few months. We also received funding from Osage Nation, the Congress. Osage Nation appropriated some funding to start to build some new buildings, to provide office space, research and development space. They're construction projects. They take a long time. They're expensive, but they're really needed, right? So if you're going to invite people to come out and do stuff, you got to have a place to put them. It's not all that exciting, but it's a requirement. And then building out the sort of the digital infrastructure piece. Do we need UTM yet? Are we thinking about that? What surveillance do we need? What C2 systems do we need in place? And so those are all the things that we've been trying to put together to make it a thing, right? So people can actually use it and test. And then also, what are the actual problems that we're trying to solve? We're not trying to replicate what New Air is doing. We're not trying to replicate what Choctaw Nation's doing, or Northern Plains Test Site. We know all those folks. We have a good relationship with them, and so we're trying to figure out what's the value add for a new BB-LOS test site. Well, we think we have a few things to kind of bring to bear. There's some crossover, and that's fine. A lot of people don't want to go all the way to New York, right? We're right in the middle of Oklahoma, but we're also easily accessible. So there are some things that we can add that maybe other test sites it's a challenge for. So that's kind of some of the things going on.
So you're basically kind of like the glue, if you will. You're bringing partners in. You're helping with the planning, and part of that is overseeing, if you will, the building of these literal buildings, construction, and also the digital infrastructure. You're doing all of that.
Yeah. Wow. And we're recruiting the technology partners to help us do that, right? So a lot of those folks you've probably had on your podcast at some point. I won't name people by name, but it's a largest project, and it's going to grow, right? The Tech Hub designation for Tulsa, the Tech Hub grant, the $57 million grant that they were just awarded. There's a couple of really large component projects that are specifically related to UAS and secure autonomy. And so now there's more work that needs to be done, which, we have to invite people in that know how to do it and have the expertise to do it. And so that's really where our sweet spot has been. We're not the experts, but we know a lot of the experts, and we know who is doing smoke and mirrors and who's actually doing the work and can provide the product. We help sift through that a little bit.
Well, that's important, and you're right. There's some folks that talk, and then there's those that do.
Yeah.
And when you think about some of the the ecosystem, again, you're in Ecosystem Month for a reason. Mm-hmm. I mean, we mentioned the Osage Nation and their LLC, of course, OSU. The region, I don't want to butcher this, the Tulsa Regional Advanced Mobility Cluster, Tulsa Innovation Labs. What we haven't talked about is WindShape. And now they've built a facility in your, kind of arena in your area that's very unique to help bolster this ecosystem. So tell us a little bit about what WindShape is doing and this unique facility they've built.
Yeah, I'll make sure to send Nico and Guillaume my business development invoice after this, just so. So WindShape, company based out of Switzerland, that went through Genius New York. They were part of that process, and then now have partnered with Osage Nation and Osage LLC to develop their first U.S. Indoor test facility. So we had a physical building that Osage Nation had received an EDA grant to renovate, and so they will be the first tenant for that building. I was just in there a couple days ago. It should be done. Fingers crossed. It should be done 1st of December.
That's
it's a state of the art indoor laboratory. Cold weather testing down to -30. They can do snow, they can do rain, they do wind. Obviously it's WindShape. And so they have a large WindShaper where you can actually fly drones in a controlled environment. And basically they're just collecting all that weather data to help create requirements and meet requirements for those future standards that come out. And then Skyway 36 itself, we will allow immediately for them to do indoor testing, and then they can go right out and do the outdoor testing immediately following if they want to kind of test in a real world environment. So it's a super cool project, and it's a lot of people involved in that. And so we're super excited. I think they're planning, they've got people lined up in the pipeline to test. And so the days the doors open, they will be working. So it's pretty cool.
No, that is really cool. I've been tracking, I saw, their little, their booth at the FAA Drone and AAM Symposium. Kind of like you said, lining people up. For when those doors do open, and you combine that with what OSU and the facilities they have, under Dr. Jacob and others. What
they were working together. Yeah, they already have an existing partnership between WindShape and OAIR, so they're going to provide research and development engineers, some of the previous OAir staff may actually be working cross functionally with WinShape. So that was one of the key, other than just, I think, WinShape really being excited about what's going on in the Tulsa region, and it's that access to OAir, which was kind of a big selling point for them to have an R&D university, right down the street. And OAir will have a presence on Skyway 36, a physical presence as well, so that makes it a little bit easier.
I'm excited for the whole industry. I'm really excited for those students that will have the opportunity to plug into this. And then, of course, the Osage Nation, and hopefully some of their people will get trained here, in this technology.
It's already happening. It's already happening. Yeah. So WinShape actually stood up a program they called Pathfinder. They've now transferred that over to Osage Nation. And so they provided a scholarship to, I think, 5 or 6 Osage Nation youth. I think they were late high school, or maybe college students. And they basically paid for all their commercial flight training up through CFI. And then they will provide a Part 107 certificate. And then also they will become interns at WinShape and kind of as phase 3 to get some engineering interns. So they'll just go right through the process, and it's fully paid for. I mean, that's, if you think about it, it's a $80,000 to $100,000 scholarship to work its way through the program. So they're planning to continue that. This is kind of the first pilot.
Oh, wow. I love that.
Yep.
And so I think you called the Osage Nation like one of these super small businesses. Craig, I'm going to call DronePort Networks a super small business also.
Yeah, we are a super small business.
And so my question is, obviously consulting is if I was going to use one word to kind of fairly embrace all of the things you're doing, it's falling in that consulting bucket. So tell us a little bit more. Are you working? I mean, it sounds like you have enough work just in the Oklahoma region, the Tulsa area that we just talked about to keep you busy for years. Are you taking on other clients? Or tell us a little bit more about the DronePort Networks consultancy.
Yeah. I mean, I tell people we do as little consulting as we can get away with, because it's super time consuming and resource intensive and not very scalable. But at this point in the industry, it's just a requirement. Like the majority of folks that you work with just don't know enough, right? And so you spend a lot of time sort of trying not to tell them everything, but kind of helping guide them. We've been blessed because we just have so many industry partners and OEMs that we can just bring in and say, hey, here's the issue. Let's figure out a way to solve it. So yes, the consulting piece. As far as work outside of Oklahoma, yes, we have 2 or 3 other projects outside of Oklahoma that really aren't at the point I can really talk about them, but they have kind of spawned from what we're doing in Tulsa, as folks come in and see oh, you've solved this problem, hey, we need help with that. Can you come over and help us with that? So we really have to kind of guard our time a little bit to say, hey, we're doing implementation right now, and that takes a lot. We should be hiring another full-time person here in the next month or so that will kind of be one of our technical program managers for a future project in Tulsa that is not that we haven't talked about. But we're planning to do some work in North Dakota. Most of that outside of the state is going to be through the CAP program. That's that Community Airspace Awareness Program that we launch. And so we've talked to some folks in Montana. We've talked to North Dakota folks. Arkansas as well. So it's something that's just really, really early, and we're kind of being a little cautious about building the pipeline too fast before we know how fast we can scale it. So we're doing as much work as we can handle and hiring as fast as we can financially manage based on revenue, right? So we're playing that game because we bootstrap. When we spun the company out, we had an initial investment. We're not raising any money yet. We may have to at some point, but my preference is to try to bootstrap as long as possible because, one of my other side gigs was running the UAS Angel Network and helping companies raise capital. So I know what that involves and takes and how hard it is to raise money in this industry. I'm trying not to do that as long as possible.
No, that makes sense. You just kind of name drop, but we didn't really elaborate. We're going to now on the Community Airspace Awareness Project, or this CAP.
Yeah.
What is that?
Yeah. So it is So when you look at the UAS industry right now, it is, and rightly so, it doesn't have any true customers. Everything's a pilot project, or it's funded by a state initiative, or it's funded by a federal initiative. And there's various reasons, which I'm sure you know, of why there isn't a huge customer base. We're kind of hitting that critical point where it's put up or shut up. The companies are going to have to figure out a way to find customers because, investor dollars only last so long, and like your runway is only so long. And so like, there's a lot of companies going like, we've got to find customers. But the other thing we realize is that, as we met with smaller, when I say smaller communities, anything smaller than Tulsa, right? Like 100,000 people, 200,000 people, they all want to also engage and want to know how this is going to impact their community, because they're hearing all these stories about, oh, Amazon did this and Wing did this. And so they're, I'm getting questions like, hey, when do I get drone delivery? When do I get this? And so they're asking those questions like, how, and there's also some public concern about how is this going to impact me personally?
Yeah, and or just the regular, the noise.
Yeah,
right?
Noise.
What's that going to look like in the sky from a visual standpoint?
Yeah. Visual noise. Call that the visual noise, right?
Yeah,
it doesn't have to make any noise.
Yeah.
So anyways, the real issue is that the size of the projects, and the ones that even now we participate in, like these are multi-million-dollar projects. These communities don't have the funds and access to even usually be able to participate. And that's one of the things that even North Dakota struggled with, is like, state invests $70 to $100 million. There are select communities that are participating, right? And there's a lot of communities that aren't, because there just wasn't enough money to expand to the point. So CAP, really what CAP is our answer to engaging smaller communities at a low cost entry level, right? So we're focused on uncontrolled airports and the communities surrounding those, and then maybe contract towered airports. So there's an airspace impact already. So autonomous aircraft drones are going to will have an immediate impact if they start doing, scaled inspection, drone delivery, whatever you want to think about. And so we put in ADS-B and remote ID receivers. We provide them a common operating picture. We collect all the data and provide it to them so that they can visualize it for policy making. And we do that like on a really, really low cost subscription, so that like airport managers and their budgets can fund it. So the R&D piece is cost, right? Like, this needs to be so cheap that it's scalable, because right now they can't afford a $200,000 system, right? It's just not, it's just not ever going to happen. And so maybe eventually there's other funding mechanisms to help these communities get really advanced, UTM platforms, and pay for that, and not just pay for it once, but be able to pay the recurring subscription fees annually that are going to come about. So CAP is really our way to just help at least give them a taste, and it's expandable, right? Because we're working with Vigilant Aerospace as kind of our back-end technology provider for kind of doing the sensor fusion and helping us provide the common operating picture. They've been kind of co-developing some of the products with us on this project. Thankfully, Creightley's been great, who's the CEO of Vigilant. And so that's the product. We've got 2 beta sites, one Mid-America Industrial Park in Pryor, which is about 30 miles outside of Tulsa, and then Ardmore, Oklahoma, which is halfway between Oklahoma City and Dallas. So they're a towered airport, contract tower. So they're going to be kind of our 2 guinea pig test sites for setting this program up. But that's happening now as we speak. So
that's exciting. And Vigilant Aerospace has it's the Flight Horizon solution that they're doing for the advanced situational awareness.
Detect and avoid. That's kind of their deal.
Okay, DAA, Airspace Management, UTM. Speaking of UTM, Craig and I are in Dallas at the GUTMA, the Global UTM Association's Harmonized Skies this week. So we're eager to learn what's happening globally, and also to get a little tour of the key site to see some of what's happening in the Dallas area. We're hearing a lot about it, and so I'm sure some lessons learned there. But Craig, you could just kind of also just casually said, we're doing some stuff in North Dakota. I love this. It's like, we've got these 2 airports that we're doing in Oklahoma, and now we've got, North Dakota too. So you'd mentioned earlier Project Ultra, and we have, of course, Tom Sawyer and Grand Sky are the sponsors for this entire month. Are you guys plugged into Ultra?
No, we're not plugged in. I think we we have to be careful about what else we want to be plugged into
Yeah, I understand.
right
I
now.
mean,
I'm monitoring from the sidelines. We have had some conversations with folks about Project Ultra. Not anybody like Chris or that they're actually leading it, but just folks that kind of know the genesis of it. And so there's some conversations about like if as you know, anytime you go into a brand new ecosystem, like there's already a lot of existing players. And so our biggest thing was, and it's why we're kind of part of the UAS Council up there now. And we've known the Oklahoma ecosystem folks for a long time. We work with the same companies that work here, that work there, right? It's a very small community.
yeah.
And so one of the things I spent a lot of time doing at the UAS Summit was just reassuring folks that like, hey, we're going to come in and take a look at some things. We are not here to compete with anybody. We're not here to like take over projects. We're here to just like fill some gaps that these projects are not. And so I think once we did that, everybody's like, okay, cool. We're good at that. Like, come on in, join the party.
Yeah.
So,
no, very cool. So what are the gaps, Craig? Like if you were to point out, what they are to everybody, like what are the specific ones you're seeing that you feel like that DronePort Networks is filling, not only in Oklahoma, but possibly in places like North Dakota or otherwise?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just, it's access to the technology, right? So, and this is a totally normal thing. New industry, a lot of research development costs that are built in to the cost structure. And a lot of these companies have raised significant capital. So there's like a level of expectation of what they charge for this product. They spent 5 years building and they raised $10 million.
Yeah.
And so when I say what gaps are we filling, I feel like I'm a therapist a lot, like talking to folks and I'm like, okay, I get it. It costs you X number of dollars to develop this product. If you want to scale this and get any market traction, you cannot make up your entire R&D budget in 12 months. It just doesn't work that way, right?
Yeah, you got to amortize that.
And so, yeah, but it's a hard thing to kind of convince their board.
Well, yeah, boards,
and so
investors,
right.
because they want a payout, right? Like they gave money. And
yeah.
I agree with you, Craig. I mean, I think you're seeing that, where people are pulling plug, sometimes board will pull the plug and say, you know what, you're just not working fast enough. But I agree with, look, without you were on the policy side at the FAA, without a beyond visual line of sight rule, this is a problem, right? Waivers are great. Yeah. And I love everything the FAA has been doing to lean forward. I love the NTAP, right? The what is it? Approval process. The near term approval process for the UTM and kind of supplemental data service providers. Lots of words.
Lots of acronyms.
And that's all well and good. But at the end of the day, people need certainty. And then they need to, as you said earlier, there's people that talk about stuff and people that do it. People need to be able to do it. And that's the key. That's, I think, where this industry is right now. As we close out 2024, we're getting close. And we look to 2025. So that's a great segue, Craig, to ask you. I mean, big year coming up for you. DronePort Networks and, the Tulsa region, in terms of all the things you guys have going on. As you look in your crystal ball, let's assume that Windshape gets to open up their facility on December 1st. Let's assume that some of these other ducks fall in a row. What do you project out for 2025 for your ecosystem there in the Tulsa region?
Yeah, no, I think that I was having this conversation yesterday with somebody about what's going to happen in 2025. Not even just personally, but just
well, we just had an election, and everybody's like, "Oh, how's that going to change things?" So, I don't know.
It's gonna, for sure. I actually put a post on LinkedIn about it yesterday, kind of how we're preparing as a company. Just mostly because I was involved in the last two transitions on the other side, right? In the agency as the transition teams came in, and I know what they're going to do, right? They're going to go.
So share,
all these programs. Here's
all
all these programs. Let's get all these programs, and we want to look at all of them. And like, that's a pet project. That's done. And it honestly, it will not even matter if these programs are already funded and they're writing checks for them. They will just stop them. And so we, what I've been asking folks that I know that are still in DC that have some level of insight and influence possibly about how this will go down is like, let's just ensure that like we really do a review of the programs, like actually look at them and not just go like, oh, this was funded by so-and-so, so we're just going to automatically cut that one. Like there's a lot of, there was so much infrastructure funding that came down the pipe in the last few years that may be from agencies that the new administration doesn't fully support, but you got to look at the details of what's actually being paid for. And if you're talking about like funding infrastructure for UAS and counter UAS that have national security implications, that probably shouldn't just like auto cut, right? You should probably actually look at that program and make sure it's something, because once you cut it and stop it, it's very difficult to get it wound back up.
Yeah, it's hard to spin it back up.
Yeah, it is. But so, yeah, so there'll be some changes for sure. But I think 2025 is going to be not because we're going to have a rule. Hopefully, we're still going to have a draft to look at for Part 108. And I think if we don't, like we've got way bigger issues if we don't see a draft in the next few months. But if we see a draft, at least that will give companies an idea of if they were going down the right path or the wrong path, or if there were any like surprises. And I think probably you're going to see a few companies that just were hopeful about a thing that doesn't look like it's going to pan out, and they start trying to figure out like how do we wind this thing down? Do we sell off pieces of this thing? So I think there's going to be some consolidation next year just after the draft comes out, even without a rule, because they're not going to have time to wait for the rule if they know what it's going to look like. Yeah. I think that it's going to get real when you start talking about integration, when you start talking about like more autonomy, more integration, what the cyber security concerns of that are, how do we protect the data? This is something we had a panel at the Oklahoma Defense Industry Association yesterday, and this was one of the big pieces of conversation was, in the National Airspace System, the FAA is the gatekeeper of everything. They control all the data flows. They ensure that operators cooperate on some level. They're only allowed to have certain pieces of proprietary information, and they're forced to share because if they don't get to participate. Well, now we're talking about a whole different level of airspace where the FAA has said we're actually not going to be the gatekeeper. We're going to be the overseer. We're going to play oversight, but we're not going to have an office that controls and approves. We want industry to figure that out. This is a whole new ball game. Like this is
hey, look, we've seen this on the private, right, on the critical infrastructure side, Craig. Yeah. You know, like what 80% of critical infrastructures are owned by private industry, and when you have a cyber vulnerability, stuff goes down in a serious way. And I'm not just talking about like power plants or like electric tower lines or whatever. I mean, substations. You know, what do we see with that IT outage? I mean, general aviation, commercial airlines shut down Delta, for God's sakes, for like a week. I mean, so yes, this is serious stuff that we need to be talking about. And we didn't even get to that, Craig. I know there's a big cyber research component of Tulsa Innovation Labs, or like that group over there. Critically important. Important.
Yeah. And that's one of the projects that we are standing up in 2025 called Safety. It was part of that Tech Hubs grant. Stands for Secure Autonomy, Feedback and Evaluation Testbed, another acronym. I know you want to add more acronyms to your
I love it. Yes.
Your bank there, but really, I always do. The whole purpose of that program is to, in an urban environment, really test mature operators' ability to operate at scale from a cyber and a national security perspective. And it's like a kind of a micro, and it's focused on commercialization, not research and development. So we've got TU Cyber Institute that'll be involved in that project, and others, which I won't call out on the podcast here, but so more details to come on that. We still got to get all the paperwork signed and make sure that the grant's good to go and all that. But hopefully by January, we can start making some announcements about initial pilot projects for that. And so I'll be really interested to see next week in Dallas. You know, you're hearing a lot about the key site. You have an idea about what's being learned based on people that we know who are down there doing the work. But like, how much of this piece are they learning? Like, we're learning that we two as two companies can operate, or us four, but like at scale, when they're having to communicate with cities and states and their data systems, and like how all that's going to play out. Be interesting to see if they're learning anything.
Well, for sure, lots of work to be done, Craig. Glad you are such a huge part of that on the physical side, on the digital side. Of course, just that, as you said, almost like a therapy side.
Right. Yeah.
Like getting
I need
people
to
in their
charge more.
armchair and
I think
talking.
therapists make more. I think they make more
Yeah,
than me. I should charge
I,
more for therapy.
I think you should charge more. But
Right.
anyway, hey, listen, it was so great to have you on the show
Yeah.
to learn about not only what you're doing and also DronePort Networks, but the larger ecosystem in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and beyond. So thank you for the work you're doing to move this industry forward. Super things happening down there, and more to follow in 2025. We're going to keep watching, Craig, and look forward to seeing you. But in the meantime, if people want to reach out to you and learn more about how they can get involved in Tulsa, how can they find you?
Yeah, sure. You can check out the website droneports.net. There's a link on there. I think there's an info link, which I get those emails directly, so you can just send it there. Or you can just reach out to me directly at cmahaney@droneports.net and LinkedIn. I'll check LinkedIn pretty regularly, so if you send me a note there, I can provide my contact info for folks. I don't put my phone number out there. You have to get that. You have to get that from me personally. So.
No, very well. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yep.
So, all right. Well, thank you so much. We're going to keep watching and have a great rest of your year and Happy New Year to you. We'll be looking forward to seeing Tulsa, Oklahoma, and everything you're doing down there continue to grow. So, everybody, thank you for joining in. We are out here.